Hey everybody, welcome to today's show of Expand the Business. I am your host, Casey Eberhart, and I am so excited and thrilled about today's show. You guys, we are in for a huge, unbelievable treat today. Here at Expand the Business, what we really try to do is bring together experts, thought leaders, people that are out in the marketplace influencing and on the verge, on the bleeding edge of not only technology, but what's working now to help people really expand their business. So we're all about marketing, and we're all about like kind of on the ground, knuckles in, really working on what's working now to help you expand the business. And today is awesome. I have been looking forward to this episode for many weeks. I'm actually really surprised I was able to squeeze our guest in for the time to record this, just simply because his own agency is rocking and rolling. There's so much stuff going on. So let me tell you a little bit about Justin Womack, who is our very special guest today. So Justin is, not only is he one of the kind of guys on the bleeding edge of technology and the bleeding edge of digital agencies and what's working now, he works with businesses and companies all over the world, really helping them focus on generating leads, ultimately making more money for those businesses. So he has a digital agency named, JMack Media. You can find that at jmackmedia.com, and it's JMack media.com. He is a co-host of a podcast called The Marketing Geeks, which we'll talk about throughout this. If you're not subscribed to the Marketing Geeks podcast, I highly recommend it. We were joking today that he goes with me every morning on a walk. I literally am obsessed with their podcast, and I'm listening to an episode every day over at the Marketing Geeks. He also has another podcast that he is a host of for a company called Banner Season. We'll get a little bit inside of that. But this dude is all over the place. He's got a lot of his business comes from Fiverr. He's actually a Fiverr Pro, which simply means that he's vetted by them. Really, they got under the hood of the business and making sure that he delivers and drives massive value to his clients. Otherwise, he would never get that designation, which gives him some unique things to market his business and market his agency on Fiverr. So we may touch on that. He's got a really cool podcast course coming up that you can find out more about at podcastmasterycourse.com. And of course, I'll put the show notes. We'll put all these links and stuff inside the show notes. So without further ado, I don't have some fancy clapping and sound effect here. So let me just welcome you to the show. So Justin, welcome, buddy.
Thank you, Casey. I love the introduction, and thank you for having me.
Well, we are thrilled to have you here. And Justin, one of the things that I always love talking to people about is kind of a multi-pronged approach to marketing and generating leads for your business. And I know that, you do email creation and email automation. You do copywriting. You've got podcast consulting and and management. In fact, if you're listening to this is really kind of cool because Justin actually manages our podcast here and is really putting this show on the map. So if you're listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or whatever, it is completely, in fact, basically all due to Justin and his team and his organizations kind of managing and producing the whole thing. Not only that, he is an Infusionsoft partner as well as a Banner Season automation specialist, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So Justin, let's just dive right into it. I would love to know your core philosophy when it comes to marketing and how that relates to your clients' businesses.
I think it starts with visibility, and I think if I want to give like a few resources that I kind of base my philosophies on, a great book, Influence by Robert Cialdini, one of my favorite books out there. That's going to hit you with all the principles of how to influence people. And all my marketing is really based on those principles. I mean, things like scarcity, social proof, just ways of validating your expertise. One of the things that I like to tell people is Fiverr is an interesting medium because a lot of people will get on Fiverr and you might have several gigs on there, but you'll never make a sale. And when I got recruited, I was one of the first Fiverr pros recruited on the platform. They found me because I was a partner with Infusionsoft, so they brought me on. I went through an interview process. I had to take a few like exams kind of things to just validate my skills. But once they approved me, it was interesting because all of a sudden I was getting so much traffic and so much attention only because they had gone ahead and validated me and they were a well-known resource. So this ability to leverage social proof from high-end sources like a Fiverr, like a Casey Eberhart, or like people, like influencers out there, it's powerful stuff. So if you're able to leverage other people that have more influence than you do and borrow some of their credibility, that's one of the biggest ways for people to get started, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, so let's spend a few minutes on that. So let's take a step back, just for those folks that don't know about Fiverr and what it is and kind of the platform. Talk to me a little bit about what Fiverr is and what the platform is and what kind of things people can find all over Fiverr.
So Fiverr was started it's a freelancing website, number one. And it was created as a way for entrepreneurs and business owners to find cheap freelance services that started at $5. When the platform launched, pretty much every gig was $5, and they slowly kind of evolved.
Yeah.
We're able to add upsells to their $5 gigs. And then eventually now with Fiverr Pro, the minimum I'm allowed to charge is $100 for a gig. And I believe I'm allowed to charge up to, I believe it's $5,000 or $10,000. I haven't attempted to do that. But we're able to charge big bucks for Fiverr Pro gigs because they validated our skills and they understand the value of not only finding somebody that can get the job done, but somebody that actually is validated, that has good reviews, because there's a lot of charlatans in the internet marketing space out there, especially. I'll use the word charlatans.
Loosely.
So having somebody validate you and being able to look at reviews and things like that adds a ton of credence to getting the job done. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you that have never been on Fiverr, it is grab a glass of wine or a beer or a cigar, whatever your vice is, and just sit down and go check out Fiverr. It's Fiverr.com. I joke that, and I talk about this in presentations all the time, that I once paid a guy $5 in London to wear a hot dog suit, put my website on a piece of cardboard, go stand out in the middle of an intersection and spin around screaming my website for $5. And I only did that. I never used it as a marketing piece or anything. I just thought if some guy's going to do that for $5, like, I'm in, right?
Yeah.
But I have used Fiverr for many things. For $5, you can go on there and get 50 business quotes with your website printed on them. You can have, when I was in the Wayback Machine and I was just trying to get my name and some practice being a podcast interviewee, I went on and paid several podcasts $5 to be a guest on their podcast. I mean, there are so many different things that you can leverage Fiverr for. So Justin, let's talk about Fiverr Pro. And then I want to come back to this influence and leverage thing. What types of things, and it's all based on a review system. So when you do a gig, you get reviewed by your customers, correct?
Correct, yes.
And so what types of things does your agency promote on Fiverr Pro? Where are you finding that, or what are you finding that people are coming to you, that audience of Fiverr Pro? What are they looking for and what are you able to bring to the table?
Well, I can tell you that the best-selling gigs that I have out there are for copywriting. So people that want both their a welcome sequence written for them, or they want a sales sequence written because they have a product they're introducing and they have a way for people to opt in on their website, but they don't have the creativity or they don't want to spend the time to actually write the copy and set up the automation. So my team will actually go in there, set up the automation, go into a site like MailChimp or ActiveCampaign, ConvertKit, Infusionsoft, whatever they're using. We can set that automation up for them, and we actually write the emails. So we have a complete package to get all that done. Beyond that, the other gig that's the most popular would be podcast consulting. A lot of people are starting podcasts. That medium is exploding, especially in 2019. It's been growing massively for the last about 5 years. Podcasting's been around for probably 15 plus years, but only in the last, I'd say, 3 to 5 years have they really nailed down the advertising abilities on podcasts. And because of that, that's why I see that there's massive growth. And plus, people just understand now how important it is to have a platform where you could be visible and get your message out directly to people. There's a ton of value in that. And you're building a brand reputation about yourself. So it's a way of creating credibility and just getting your message out there. Just having a podcast is people will look at you in a different light just because you have a show. It doesn't matter how good it is or what. I mean, a lot of people won't even listen to it. They'll just see that you have a show and they'll just think higher of you because you do that.
Well, so let's push in a little bit on this idea of leveraging influence, and we'll kind of couch that around podcasting. I'll come back to copywriting a little bit later. So with Marketing Geeks podcast and the other podcasts that you do, how do you use that to leverage other people's influence? Like let's start back in the way beginning. Why would somebody who doesn't necessarily have the credibility to consider themselves a quote unquote expert, why would they consider using a podcast as a way to, or what are the benefits of starting a podcast? Maybe we'll start there.
Yeah. So first and foremost, there's the perceived benefit that I just kind of mentioned earlier. The perception is that anyone that has a podcast is a greater authority than somebody that does not have one. Or if you have a book, you're perceived as a greater authority, things like that. So in a lot of ways, I compare podcasting to kind of like writing an ebook was 5 years ago, where everybody had an ebook and that added credibility. Well, now podcasting is the new ebook, in my opinion. It's like you have to have a podcast to have that credibility now. Plus, if you want to build relationships with high-powered people in the industry, having a podcast is one of the best ways to cold outreach to big names in your industry and get them to actually to want to be on your show. So this coming Friday, we're releasing an episode on Marketing Geeks where we interviewed Ryan Levesque. And he's a pretty big name. I mean, he's spoken on stages like Traffic and Conversion.
He's huge.
Yeah, he's a big name. He's the creator of the Ask Method. He wrote the books Ask and Choose. And so we actually have him on the show. We've had Pat Flynn on the show and John Lee Dumas.
One of my favorite episodes. If you guys know Pat, then you have to go listen to the Marketing Geeks episode where he's on there. If you don't know who Pat is, you have to go listen to this episode because he is a fantastic affiliate and internet marketer. He loves Back to the Future. He's a super fun guy. And he really just kind of keeps it real and keeps it down and dirty in terms of really talking about concepts that people can understand. You guys did a fantastic job of having Pat on the show.
What was really cool is I met Pat in person at Social Media Marketing World. And one of the reasons that I even got like introduced and brought up to him was because we had one of the Social Media Marketing World reps on our show first. She happened to be from my exact hometown that I'm from, which was like a cool icebreaker. So I found out we actually went to the same high school, different years, but went to the same high school. And then when I went to Social Media Marketing World, she came and met me. And then she walked me up to Pat Flynn, introduced me, told him about my show. He kind of recognized my cover art. He had never listened to the show. But because of that introduction, I was able to get him to agree to be on my podcast. So because of the podcast, that led to an introduction that got me access to Pat Flynn. And then by having him on the show, it's now opened the doors to tons of other guests that want to be on because I've had Pat Flynn on the show now. And that's probably one of the reasons Ryan Levesque came on the show, because he saw that I've had guests like John Lee Dumas and Pat Flynn. So as you build and as you attract some of these higher names, you're going to get tons of people wanting to be on your show. And that provides opportunities to either monetize, because these are people that might want to buy programs directly from you. The guests themselves might, or their audience might want to do something with it. So if you're doing this correctly, every time you have a guest on, you should have a system set up so that they are agreeing to promote your episode. And then each and every time somebody comes on, you're borrowing a portion of their audience. And if the show is good enough, some of that portion is going to stick and they're going to become a fan of your show and a subscriber and a listener.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I'm out speaking and on stages, I kind of train on this idea of why is Oprah the most powerful woman in the world, right? And I ask audiences, Justin, you've been in the audience a gazillion times when I've asked this question, who's the most powerful woman in the world? And it's Oprah's always in the 1 or 2 spot, like 100% of the time. And really, if you look at her philosophy or her formula, it's exactly what Justin is talking about. It's essentially other people's content, which is your guest, plus their reach, which is their audience, equals more listeners or more people in your sort of space. So, when Justin interviews Pat Flynn, he's using Pat's content, Pat's reach to bring more listeners to his show, to Justin's show. And Pat, at the same time, is doing the same thing. He gets to be leveraging the Marketing Geeks audience, the Marketing Geeks content, their reach to bring people over to him. So the listeners that listen to Justin's show may not have known who Pat Flynn was, but once they listen to that episode, they're like, oh my gosh, that dude is just awesome. I'm going to go sign up for his podcast, which is Smart Passive Income. He is over at smartpassiveincome.com. Pat's awesome. So you really do get to sort of leverage that audience. So Justin, I can already hear people kind of emailing in and talking about, well, you know, I'm a network marketer, or I own a roofing business, or I own a massage, you know, a day spa, or I own a small landscaping business. Why would little old me want to have a podcast? Why would little old me need to do things like social proof and have emails written? Like, why would, you know, Bob from Bob's Roofing Company consider using a podcast?
Excuse me. I think that the main reason is that it doesn't matter how small your niche is. What matters is that you're perceived as the expert in the industry. And if somebody's going to hire a roofer and they're reviewing between the various options of roofers that are out there, the fact that you have a podcast and you are teaching the concepts of roofing, or you're interviewing some of the top roofers in the industry, or you're bringing on people that have hired roofers and asking, like, what do you look for in a roofer, things like that. There's so much content that you can both learn about your industry, and two, people are going to perceive you again in a higher light, and they're going to be more likely to hire the guy that runs the show on roofing, or they are the guy that that teaches the concepts of roofing. Because if you're a teacher, people assume that means that you are also the best implementer of doing the work. And so again, perception is reality. So as long as people perceive you to be the best, they're going to go after the best, or the majority of people will. So yeah, that's what I would look at.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. There's a phrase that we kind of use in the speaker world and the presenter trainer world, kind of behind the scenes. And it's very simple. It's totally cliche, but absolutely accurate. And it can apply to the roofing business even. And it's he or she who has the marker makes the money. And essentially it's he or she who's up doing the presentation and writing out and training is going to be the one that makes the money, because perception is reality. Therefore, that person is perceived primarily as the expert. You know, while you were explaining the roofing business on why that person would do a podcast, I just thought of if I were a roofer and I wanted to do a podcast, I would probably interview lots of people in the real estate space, because I would interview the investors, the bankers, the hard money people, the folks that are wholesaling deals out there, the real estate agents that, if I'm a local, maybe it's just in my local space, but it gets me in with those guys and gals to get my name out there. But the other thing that it does, you know, and just thinking about this, kind of broadening it, is if I was a roofer in, you know, Puyallup, Washington, which is my hometown, this teeny tiny little thing, although I live in Los Angeles now, so don't hold Puyallup against me. But, you know, you could then, if you were Bob in Bob's Roofing Company, you have a podcast and you wanted to interview a real estate investor in Chicago. Well, maybe you have a referral agreement with a roofing company in Chicago, so that if any leads come to you from that point of view, you simply pass them off to the people in Chicago and take a cut. It's just like huge leverage.
Yeah, I want to give two examples here. One example is Matt Bronning. He's a client of mine. Our agency services a lot of his Infusionsoft and podcast needs, and he runs two shows now. So the first show that we developed was called The Driven Entrepreneur, and it was about interviewing high achieving entrepreneurs and kind of getting their origin stories in a sense. But what he realized was that he wanted to get more speaking gigs, and he's kind of exploring getting back into like corporate speaking and things like that. So he created a second show called Speaking of Getting Booked. And this show is where he's interviewing the bookers. So he's using this as an excuse to get in with the people that are booking speakers. And he's interviewing them and asking things like, what are the criteria that you're looking for? How does somebody go about contacting you directly? What would be interesting from a cold email standpoint? Like, what would get your attention? Those kind of questions. And he's building relationships with the bookers through the show, because he knows that he wants to speak more, and he's going to leverage those relationships for himself, while he's also adding value to a ton of other speakers that want to learn the exact same thing.
Plus, he's playing to the bookers' egos.
Yes.
Right? I mean, on some level, let's just face it, you know, as a speaker, I know the audience by which he's trying to talk to, right? And a lot of bookers are ego driven, right? Our job as speakers is to get up there and do our song and dance and make them look like rock stars to their organizations, right? So the other thing is what I really like about that is it would also give the audience the audience are primarily speakers and other bookers. And so if you are a speaker and you're just getting started and you haven't quite figured out how to get inside of the heads and the minds of those booking agents, then that show would play right into that. And he's kind of going behind the scenes and giving everybody inside glimpses of how to help a particular group of business owners, in this case, speakers, save time and make more money in their business. Yeah.
Yeah. And in that same regard, he also runs a speaker training program. So,
oh, I'm shocked.
The listeners of the show are likely to be speakers or want to be speakers, that are aspiring. And so they fit right into his customer avatar. So that's one of the groups that he likes to teach, because he teaches NLP, but he teaches how to use NLP from the stage to be a better speaker. So he's leveraging that. Now, one other example I wanted to bring is going back to Pat Flynn, because we talked about kind of the roofing idea of starting a podcast like that. Well, Pat started a podcast on one of the smallest niches you can imagine. He started a podcast on food truck companies.
Yep.
And although he admits that it's got a smaller audience than any of his other shows, it's been one of the more profitable shows for him, because he's got a very narrow niche, but these are highly qualified listeners that he's positioned himself to be an expert in food truck businesses and how to market them. And he's gotten clients off of it, even though it's a small niche audience. So it doesn't matter how small it is. There's going to be, everything has an audience. You just have to be able to know how to communicate and find that audience but it can be a big thing.
Well, it's kind of funny, just going back to Pat's food truck deal. If I remember the story correctly, because I've heard him tell this story before, is I believe that it actually started with him writing an ebook, ironically, on how to help market your food truck business. And he was selling lots of those. And then he started interviewing food truck owners and businesses that have food trucks come out to their location. And that's how he's built this like little cottage industry. Ironically, I own part of a craft beer bar, beer house up in Seattle, and we have food trucks come as opposed to us having a kitchen, right? And so I have told several of the food truck guys that we have there about Pat's podcast on food trucks. So it's for something as small and as niche and as narrow as that. Again, if you have an audience or you have a set of customers, it's also a way to leverage your customers.
Yeah,
So Justin, just sticking on that podcast thing for a second, it would also seem to me that whatever business people are in, whether, again, using either network marketing or construction or, Airbnb properties, you could do a podcast where you're literally just talking to your customers.
Yeah.
Why, what were you looking for? What did you find was the best experience? How can our industry or our profession better serve you as the customer, right?
Yeah, and I tend to teach a number of different ways of monetizing podcasts. One of them is the target market client as your guest on the show. So one of them is using your target market client or your customer avatar as the person that your show is going to be interviewing. So you're attracting that person, you're interviewing them. While they're on the show, they're likely to learn what it is that you do, or you're going to have that pre-interview with them, and you could tell them a little bit about what you do. And because, again, you've leveraged yourself as the host of this show, the expert in the industry, if there's a need for it, or when there's a need for it later on, they're likely to come back to you to hire you because, again, you are the perceived expert and likely the real expert.
Yeah. So let's talk about that that strategy for a second. I have been on podcasts where I walked into being a guest on somebody's show where they were absolutely targeting me as their ideal client, but they were using their podcast to leverage me as a guest on the show. And it has to be done with the art of conversation, because it can be very douchebaggery, if you will, when it comes off as you're just like, hey, I just want you on my show, so off the air, I can tell you how amazing I am and you can hire our stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you do have to be a little bit, I don't know.
You do. I agree. But having the podcast is a great way to open those conversations, though, because
absolutely,
if you're gonna do like the spammy type of messages on like LinkedIn or Facebook where you're messaging like 1,000 people at a time, and I'm talking about cold, where you don't know the person, you're just cold messaging looking for sales. Well, introducing yourself and saying you have a podcast and you're looking for guests is a lot softer of an intro and more enticing than just saying you want to get somebody on the phone call because you are going to offer a free strategy session or you're going to offer something like that. because people know that being on a podcast has value to them, and it's kind of an exchange of value. So, so yes, it needs to be done with a certain amount of tact. I would agree with that, but it also can be very effective because it's a great way of opening those conversations. If you're great at sales, it's a good strategy.
Yeah, and I think I know you and I talked a little bit about this off the air before we came on board or came on the air. But I think when you do that, the reality is that as a podcaster, right, the guy or gal doing the interview, it's our job to make our guests look so much like a rock star that guest will actually go out and share that episode with their network, because they want to feel proud of, like, oh my gosh, I was just interviewed on Expand the Business. Like, this is awesome. If I got on here and Justin and I just kept trying to sell myself, and, I kind of, I wasn't giving you time to talk, and I was kind of, being confrontational and kind of just a D-bag, then the reality is you wouldn't share this with your audience anyways. And the only real play I would have is the optimization of your name in the show notes or blog posts or whatever.
Which I think is why, if you're going to take this model on, you're not pitching them on the show. You're pitching them before or after the show. It's not, I mean, the show needs to be about adding value. For the most part, it should be free value. And I mean, the show is not a webinar. You're not taking the model on where every episode you're going to have a $1,000 paid offer at the end of every episode, because that's it's not going to build an audience. It might get a few sales down the line. It may or may not, but it's not going to build an audience, because people don't want to be sold all the time. They want value. They want free value. A lot of our listeners, they tell us that they're looking. I mean, they basically use us as like an education resource. They're listening to Marketing Geeks to learn marketing. They're not looking necessarily to even hire us. They want to learn marketing, and we're bringing on high-end guests. We're discussing high-end concepts, and they listen to us because of that. So, yeah.
And I also think what you guys do a great job of, and I think as a podcaster or somebody that's doing this as a medium to get word out or get message out, content is king, content is ka-ching, content is queen, content is kind of the basis that levels the playing field between all of the entrepreneurs. But so few people will position themselves as an expert or position themselves as somebody that has the ability to interview somebody and make them look like a rock star, that I think it just stops people in their track. And so one of the things that I think a podcast can do is create that know, like, and trust factor. I would make an assumption that the more episodes you guys do of Marketing Geeks, the more customers and clients you're going to have for JMack, because you will have taken the time to get rid of the scary, right? You've made marketing a little bit more well-known. You've talked about some acronyms. You've talked about some concepts, so that when somebody is ready to hire a marketing agency or bring on a copywriter or bring on somebody knowing that they need automation, your podcast really allows you to have somebody get to know you, like you, trust you, know your sensibility, know your jokes, how your personality is, right from the podcast.
I mean, it's true. I got an email actually today from somebody who listened to the show. It says, like, I feel like I know you. And it's just kind of funny because it's somebody I've never met. I don't even know who they are, other than their name in the email. But it's just, it's true, because people listen in all kinds of ways. Like, I've had people tell me they listen while they go jogging or they go walking, like you just said too, or they, they're listening in their cars on the way to work, like things like that. So it's funny how it builds like this relationship where they feel like they know you personally. And like you said, know, like, and trust is this huge influential factor in who you're going to hire for business. So when I can create that, well, I mean, and it's real. So, I mean, they're getting to know the personality behind the name. But when I can create that, it definitely opens up the bigger likelihood that they're going to want to work with somebody that they know, like, and trust.
Yeah. And the other thing that it does, and talk to me a little bit about this, and maybe I call it something differently than what you would call it. But, one of the things when I was putting the show together, I knew that we were going to be doing lots of stage swaps or cast swaps, where I do a guest spot on your show, you come do a guest spot on my show. Both people win because we're taking different roles inside the episode. I have a friend, Rochelle Shaw, who's going to be an upcoming guest, and honestly, I love Rochelle. I've known her for years and years and years, but she was kind of out of sight, out of mind, not from it for any other reason that we've just been really busy. And she asked me to be on her digital summit. And in that conversation, that's when I said, oh my gosh, you have to be a guest on our show as well. So talk to me a little bit about the ability to leverage the platform in a stage swap scenario.
Yeah. So I think it starts, so when we launched our show, I'm just going to just give a little bit of background here. We actually didn't even bring a guest on for almost 10 months. Our first like 10 months of episodes were, maybe there was like one or two exceptions to this. They were me and Andros, my co-host, teaching concepts. We just covered concepts. And then as we moved into year two, we started getting a ton of people reaching out to the show, inquiring about being a guest. And they would just, because we would, in the show notes of every episode or on the show, we would mention our email address on where to request to either be a guest or suggest a guest on the show. And over time, that's grown now to the point where we're getting like 10 to 20 emails a week of people that want to be on the show. We're turning people down now because we have to. We're booked out through October right now with guests. But one of the things that I've learned over time and working with, because I manage Matt Browning's podcast, I'm now managing your podcast. One of the things I've learned is the way that you book these people really, really matters. So we've created a form, and we're using a software called JotForm, which is they have a free version and a paid version. I highly suggest checking it out.
That's J-O-T?
JotForm. It's a very great software for creating an interactive form. It can integrate with like Infusionsoft or different email marketing platforms. But what we do is we started asking questions like, do you have a podcast? Would you be willing to do a podcast swap? If we have you on our show, would you be open to having us on your show? Those kind of questions. How big is your social media following? Are you willing to promote the show? So we're pre-framing the episode so that they understand that, yeah, there is an exchange here. Depending on, we might go a little softer on some of the bigger names, like we might, but if it's people that we're kind of learning about because they reached out to us and they don't necessarily have like a gigantic following, then we want to make it so that there is a bit of an exchange of value so that we can appear on their show, they can appear on our show, or they could do some sort of alternative promotion where we're both getting value from each other. And I think that comes with pre-framing the relationship and having a good form for people with questions to fill out and information like that really, really helps the process.
Yeah. So you brought up something in that and you kind of just whizzed past it. So I want to and that was my fake, too cheap for sound effects.
Fast forward VCR.
Exactly. You want to know how big their social media following is.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that from a kind of a build the tribe sort of perspective. Anybody that's been around this show, certainly here at Expand the Business, or have seen me speak or talk, I'm all about building your tribe. That social media following, at this point, are you guys going to really consider having a guest on the show that has like 124 Facebook followers? They hate Instagram. They have 9 Pinterest followers and they don't have a YouTube channel and they've got 12 connections on LinkedIn.
Not unless there's some kind of a celebrity that I've heard of through television or some legacy media and they just haven't adopted social media. So it's very unlikely.
Yeah. And that's because as you're trying to grow, you want to be able to leverage. One of the reasons why you would do a podcast, it seems to me, is to leverage into your guest network. So I just think it's really important that all business owners build that social media following or build that meetup following or build that LinkedIn or whatever, wherever your customers are following. Yeah.
Yes. And ideally we also want to try to vet them a little bit if we can find the time. Sometimes we get so many requests that we don't have a ton of time to vet everybody, but we want to also make sure that they're getting a good engagement on their social media because it's easy to get 5,000 friends on Facebook or a ton of LinkedIn followers. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting a ton of engagement on the platforms. So we also want to look at like, okay, how are they perceived in the marketplace? What kind of engagement do they get on social media? Those kind of metrics are also important to look at because again, people buy fake followers still. It's still a thing. You can, it used to be on Fiverr, you could go buy fake followers. I think they finally enforced against that now.
Well, not only did Fiverr enforce that, but like I have a Amazon business and you used to be able to go buy reviews and buy stuff like that. And Facebook, I know Facebook did it. I know Twitter did it. I know Amazon did it, where they started putting up fake listings seeing who was going to buy them, and then they would basically go close those accounts down. So just kind of, again, that's not really the way I would do. I would expand the business. But so let's stay on social media. Let's stay on social media for just a minute. If somebody doesn't have a podcast, right? But they know they want and or need more exposure to potential customers, potential distributors, potential vendors, whatever they want to get in front of. What give me a couple of things that they could do right now if they were trying to get on your show, The Marketing Geeks. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the things that when I have identified a podcast that I want to be on, I am very strategic in that about a month before I ask to be on the show or go fill out the form that you have, I'm going to promote that podcast on my Facebook page. I'm going to tag the hosts in there. I'm going to go talk about how awesome their episodes are. I'm going to go actually listen to several of the episodes so I know how the banter is that those guys or gals have on their show. So when I come to the table and fill out that form, I kind of am right there on par. I already know what you're really looking for. What kind of things can people do?
Well, it's funny that we had a guest on that was a special. His specialty was cold email marketing, and he used a strategy on us to get on our show. But he talked about it too. How when you reach out to a show you want to be on, you should always at least reference a past episode, make points that you actually listened to the show. Give some feedback about, things like that. And if you could do that, even if the rest of the message is like a template, like a cut and paste template, it at least personalizes it to the point that it's like, this isn't just another like fully cut and paste template that we get all the time. This is somebody that actually took the time to recognize an episode that they appreciated. They took the time to do this, and it does stand out more. I can tell you that if the first line of the email is like, or the same thing goes on like LinkedIn. If I get a private message, if the first line of that private message feels generic to me, I won't even read the rest. I'll just ignore it. It just goes straight into the spam box. So, so by recognizing that's a big thing. Another thing that people can do, and this is, there's a huge industry growing of these podcast, what's called like guest promoters. So they're like PR companies basically you hire them, and then they have built out relationships with a ton of different podcasts, and they'll get you on a ton of different shows. So that's a big industry that's like all of a sudden developing. I see ads on Facebook a lot for them.
I'm part of that. I'm on both sides of the equation. So I have a listing that I wish I knew it off the top of my head, but it's an email that goes out that essentially is sent to, they play matchmaker essentially.
Yeah.
They've got a list of podcasters and a list of guests, and they send the guests to the podcasters and the podcasters to the guests and sit somewhere right down in the center. And what's great about that is it gives you exposure to people and interesting people that might be good customers or might be good guests that you or I may not have access to or not even know exist.
Yeah. And like, to give an example, we had one of those companies contact us with a list of about 10 potential guests. And what really stood out about that email is like 2 of them were like pretty well-known names and big names. And the rest of them I'd never heard of. So they understand that they have to at least provide a few of those big names to kind of get my attention. And then it's more likely I'm going to take on these other people that are probably just paid clients that are, they probably don't have huge followings. But that's a way that I think they're leveraging that system. Like, for example, one of the guests is Dan Locke, who I actually wasn't that familiar with him, but I've gone on to find out that he has millions of followers and things like that. And he's going to be on our show later this month. And he was introduced to us by one of those companies, along with another list of about 8 other names. And many of those other names I hadn't heard of, but that, after reading the descriptions, a lot of them were intriguing enough, and we're bringing on several of them on the show.
Well, because that company is leveraging the credibility of Dan's name and some of the other bigger names to have their lesser known names put in front of you. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you're just starting out a podcast, maybe the bigger names are going to scare you and freak you out. So you want to do some of the lesser known names to get your chops and get your practice in on really kind of how all that works. I know you're doing a webinar on podcasting. Talk to me a little bit about why What on the podcasting, I know that it is podcastmasterycourse.com, and it's really to help people kind of get started down this podcast thing. I can tell you just from a guy who's done this for years that what stops people is they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so freaked out. I got to get a studio system and I got to get microphones and I don't know how to edit it and I don't know how to come up with the music and I don't know where to post it, all that jazz. Is that kind of what this course is going to encompass?
Yes, in a lot of respects. I wanted to create a course that's simple. So it's like how you could create a podcast, even if you don't know a ton about technology. So even if you're not a whiz at tech, but you want to create a show, and you don't even, and I'm going to give you a couple different examples of how you could do it with a limited budget to get started in the beginning. And you can, upgrade as your show improves. That's when you kind of make the upgrades. So like, for example, like which hosting platform are you going to use? There's free hosting platforms out there that a lot of people don't know about. One of them is Anchor.fm, which actually got purchased by Spotify recently and is it's actually a very good hosting platform. Now, one of the fears that a lot of people have with anything that's free is that you don't necessarily have as much control over your own show as if you're paying somebody else to host a show. So that's a fear that some people have. So some people don't want to take that risk. And so there's options like Podbean, or there's options like Libsyn, or there's options like Blueberry, or what is it called? I think it's Blueberry, Blubrry. And so there's all these different hosting platforms out there. And depending on what your needs are, depending on where you're at, you're gonna find that your needs vary or your needs differ. Plus, some of the podcast platforms are better at hooking you up with advertisers. So if your model that you want to pursue is monetization through advertising, actually Anchor.fm is one of the best platforms that I found that actually hooks you up with advertisers pretty quickly and pretty easily. So if you're able to build an audience with a lot of listeners, that's a good platform to connect with advertisers. A platform like Libsyn, you have to reach a certain threshold before they'll even consider you to be added to their advertising platform. You have to have, I think it's like 100,000 downloads before they'll even look at you. So it really depends on where you're at. And we're going to go over all the different things like your hosting, what's a microphone that you can get away with on a budget versus what's a microphone if you want to have like the highest of end show, what's the best microphone to get? How do I get my cover art created? How do I create the introductory theme music, things like that? And like, where do I find good royalty-free music? So a lot of that stuff we're going to cover and give you the foundations. And then beyond that, we're going to talk about the strategies. So if you already have a podcast, there's going to be value as well, because we're going to share like things like, how do you attract the best guests? If I want to do the advertising method, how do I find advertisers, even if I'm on Libsyn and I don't have that many downloads? Because there are alternative advertiser platforms that we'll talk a little bit about, and how you can get your podcast signed up for them, and then they can connect you with potential advertisers. So our show has been monetized via Anchor, and it's been monetized via a platform like AdvertiseCast. So we've had advertisers come from multiple different sources.
Awesome. And we here at Expand the Business, we've chosen strategically not to necessarily do outside sponsors and advertisers. Quite frankly, you guys, it's only because I'm a control freak and want to control the message that the audience is actually hearing. So for me, I'm just super strict in what I would ever promote and the guests I would ever promote. So the way that we will probably do it is we will eventually get to a point where to be a guest on the show is going to mean that you, quote, sponsor an episode, right? So let's just throw out a number, $1,000 to sponsor an episode, but that will give you your episode, but then you will be talked about on 3 or 4 or 5 episodes outside. So it's really kind of leveraging an entire community. So
and that's a different model of advertising too, is that you control the contract.
Yeah.
So you either hire a company like that's gonna pay you on what's called a CPM basis, which is cost per 1,000 impressions or listens to your show, or you control the contract and you sell a preset deal where you're going to provide so many episodes. I know of a company that made a big contract with a major bank, and they're getting, I think it's like $10,000 a month. But they also agree to have one of their high-end bank representatives as a guest on the show every month if they choose to use it. And they are the sole sponsor of the podcast for the period of time, as long as that contract lasts. And but they privately negotiated that deal completely without using any of the advertising platforms that are out there. So that's another way of monetizing. And it's actually probably more profitable that way until you start reaching those, 10,000, 100,000 listeners per episode, then the standard advertising would,
Yeah. And I want to move off podcasting, but I was just thinking one more way that you could use your podcast if you're just getting started is to seal the deal, if you will. And let me give you an example. Justin's show, Marketing Geeks, is all about, marketing and what's working now. And they really kind of geek out a little bit on technical stuff and all that kind of jazz. Well, let's say that there was a potential customer that was looking at hiring JMack Media and Bob's consulting firm. And all things being held constant, Justin walks in and says, well, we actually have the Marketing Geeks podcast. Once we start working, I'd love to build a case study out of what we're doing for your organization and have you a guest on our show. It'll definitely get you some exposure into your marketplace.
Yeah.
Well, he's just leveraged and sealed the deal over Bob's consulting hut that doesn't have that reach or that audience, right?
It's a big value add. So even if you're selling like a mastermind program or something like that, it's a big value add that, if you become a part of my high-end mastermind program, you're going to get a guaranteed guest spot on my show, something like that. And our show is our average is 2,000 listeners in the first 30 days of a release. So that's a pretty decent audience. And so you're going to get a pretty good exposure by appearing on our show within those first 30 days, and it'll continue to grow over time. But our average within the first 30 days is 2,000 listeners. So it's a very good value add. You're getting a very big stage. You'd spend thousands of dollars to get on a seminar stage with a fraction of that audience. For
yeah. Trust me, I know. I totally get it. So Justin, I know that I introduced you into an organization called Banner Season. And Banner Season, for those of you who don't know, Banner Season is the premier site where you can customize and personalize literally one-off promotional products and have them sent to your customers or clients or friends and family if you want. So you can do things like customize one water bottle or one coffee mug or one box of brownies, right? And Justin, I know that the two things that I know you've brought into Banner Season is, number one, you've done a podcast for Banner Season. And two, they have engaged you in writing some of their emails and their communications with their new customers, their independent referral partners, so on and so forth. Talk to me a little bit about why that was an interesting project that you would take on. I mean, I know that at this point you get to sort of cherry pick the projects you work on. Why was Banner Season something that you would kind of go all in on in terms of creating an entire podcast for them, as well as doing all their email sequencing and automations?
Well, I mean, it starts with a concept in marketing called lifetime customer value that I'm a big believer in. And what that really means is that there's certain ways that you can make money in your business. You can either sell new products, you could sell to cold traffic, meaning these are people that you've never heard of. You could sell to your past customers, which are people that bought from you, but they haven't bought from you in a while, or you could sell to your current customers. And one of the easiest audiences to sell to is your current customers, but only if you've been developing a relationship with them and adding value throughout. So what Banner Season does, which I love, is that their business, which is not necessarily unique in that there's other companies that offer similar items, but what they do is they tailor to business. So they're built for businesses that want to run their campaigns automated through like CRMs like Infusionsoft or Entreport or big CRMs like that, or Salesforce even, where you can actually you treat like direct mail like it's an email marketing automation campaign. So we're setting up like cards that go out or gifts that go out like they're fully automated systems, because we know that adding value to our clients is going to add to our bottom line over time. Whether, maybe not for everybody, but the clients that do buy are going to pay for the campaigns that I put out there, because we're developing, not only are we developing stronger relationships, but we're developing raving fans. And what are raving fans more likely to do? But they're more likely to send you referrals. Because if they love you, they're going to tell their friends about you. And if they don't, they're not going to do that. So, this is an awesome tool for creating like raving fans that want to promote you. And so that's, I mean, I think that's what attracted me to Banner Season the most. And now it's, you know, it's a tool that I can apply to my podcast. So we have a guest on. My questionnaire now asks for the guest mailing address in advance. That's something we added. The Jot form integrates with Infusionsoft, so I have that automatically going into my platform. And then it can trigger, all I have to do is apply a tag, and I can trigger a guest campaign so that a card and a mug goes out to the guest automatically to add value to them, because I know that by doing that, they're going to be more likely to promote the show. They're going to feel better about their appearance. I mean, it's going to help build my reputation in the industry. It's only doing good things. Same thing goes for Fiverr. If I have a client on Fiverr and there's a lot of money in re-engaging your old clients on a freelancing platform. And if you're not reaching out to them or you're not capturing their contact information, then they're probably going to forget about you over time, unless you do some kind of like incredible job. But even if you do that, they might forget about you because you didn't take the time to really build the relationship with them and do that. So this is like an automation tool for creating relationships. And that's what attracted me to it. So I think intuitively I knew like how to kind of write sales copy for it. And so I wanted to be a part of this because I really believe in the platform and the product.
Well, what's really cool and what you really bring to the table, and, you know, as a guy kind of really in the thick of it with Banner Season, one of the reasons why, you know, I made such a pitch to bring you kind of into the fold was that as marketers, our job really is to communicate with our potential customers and our customers and influencers in a multitude of ways where they may hear the message. So, you know, there's text marketing, there's search engine marketing, there's social media marketing, there's email marketing, there's podcasting as a way of marketing, and being able to send out a customized, personalized gift to somebody is another way to reach out and touch them. So it kind of just helped fill out a broad spectrum of being able to communicate with potential customers. And even though, you know, someone like my mom can use Banner Season to send out a water bottle here or there.
Or Christmas cards.
Or Christmas cards, right? Or holiday cards. You know, you hit the button one time and send it out to everybody, and it's completely personalized and customizable. It's such a great tool, like you said, in thank you gifts. You know, we work with I work a lot with people in the real estate profession, and one of the things that they will all tell you is like, oh my gosh, the referrals are bread and butter of our business. And if we lose the referrals, we're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
Right. So something like this gives us one more prong to touch those potential customers.
And I think of like Ryan Dice, a digital marketer, has that famous quote that he or she who is willing to spend the most to acquire a customer will always win in terms of advertising. Well, I would say the same thing applies to he or she who is willing to spend the most to keep a client is always going to win as well.
Hands down.
Because, yeah. You're making them feel special, because not many people are going to go out there and spend $10 on their client to give them a gift, even though it's not a big deal. But they're not going to do it because they just want to put that money in their pocket, and they're not seeing a long-term view. They're looking at short-term profits, not a long-term play.
Yeah. I mean, take Banner Season again, just for an example. If you guys go to expandthebusiness.com, I'm going to entice you to give me your email address, right? And I'm going to do something for you that I think is sufficiently valuable for you to give me your exchange of your email, right? So at this point, I've got a 30-minute download on how to generate more referrals now, right? Well, if you go to expandthebusiness.com, put your email address in there, you get more referrals now as a gift. I say on there, hey, give me your address. I want to actually send you a surprise in the mail. You do that, it triggers about a $10 product coming out of Banner Season. You're going to get a thank you card and a treat. I'll leave it at that. If you want to check that out, you can go to expandthebusiness.com and see for yourself. And you know, that investment is $10. About 80% of people that opt into expandthebusiness.com leave me their address. So about 80% of those people, I'm already investing $10 in without them ever being a customer. Number one, about 50% of those people will take that gift and that card and repost it on social media going, oh my gosh, I got this, which gives me another place to be in front of that potential customer. But it also sets up so much goodwill that when I send a second email that says, hey, go check out this particular affiliate product, or go check out this Facebook group, there's a higher likelihood that that's going to be sticky because I took the first step in investing in those customers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've built relationships, rapport, or you've invested in rapport with the prospect. So yes, there's a big difference between somebody that already provided a $10 gift in advance, and there's one of the principles in the book Influence that I mentioned in the beginning of the show is the principle of reciprocity. And so if you give somebody a gift, like, and this is the concept that is behind every online funnel, where you have this exchange of value, you're giving an ebook, you're giving a PDF, you're giving a free recording, something like that, in exchange for an email address. The reason that's more successful is because of this law of reciprocity, that people feel indebted if you give them something, and they're more likely to want to do something in return. So you're leveraging one of the principles of influence there.
Absolutely. And influence and leveraging of influence is so massive. Justin, I know we've got just a few minutes left. I wanted to touch on another topic. I know with Matt, you are part of his mastermind, and you kind of help manage and run of that. You are now helping us with our mastermind program. How important do you see masterminds playing a role in helping increase skill set, leverage, so on and so forth?
I believe in them hugely. And I think it goes back to that saying from, I don't know who gets credit for this, if it's Jim Rohn or Dale Carnegie, but it's you kind of become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, including your income. And I think when you join a mastermind program, you're going to get a lot of good content, but you're really buying access to the network. One of the things that people don't necessarily realize is that the best value you're going to get from a mastermind is you're going to get untethered access to that mastermind network. And there's the relationships that you build inside the network are where you're going to make the most money, or you're going to see the potential most profits. So if you're just joining to learn new skills, you're going to learn them, but that's not where the real value is. The real value, again, is you're getting this access to people on a consistent basis that are also playing at a high level, and you're able to kind of build partnerships and relationships with them. So that's where I see masterminds have their highest level of value.
Yeah. Not only that, going back to, if I were just starting a podcast and I would want to have access to people that have some influence, I would join a mastermind program, and I would look for the smartest people in that mastermind, including the organizers of it, including all the speakers that come speak at them, whoever has the influence inside of there. That's who I would start out as having guests or short interviews or whatever and whatnot with. So, Justin,
yeah, I want to add one thing though, because when I first got into like the seminar industry, I worked for a very high-end speaker on the back end, and he was selling packages for, his highest end program was $100,000 at the time. His mastermind program was $12,000, just getting started. But again, the thing that I found was, because at first, coming into this industry, I hadn't been exposed to it that much until I was in my late 20s. And so, it's just like there's a whole mentality shift where you're like, who would spend $100,000 for a coaching program? But what I found is that the people that did spend the money, and the people that actually got a return on their investment, were the people that joined and they leveraged the relationships they built in that network. And they leveraged the stage time with the speaker. And by doing that, the ones that succeeded were able to create more than $100,000 in value, because that's how they did it. So I just wanted to add that, because there is a whole mentality shift that comes in this industry, where if you've never been exposed to it, it's shocking. But having worked on the back end, that's where I saw people actually find success.
Yeah, like even in our mastermind program, you may have seen it on Facebook, called the Platinum Inner Circle. One of the things that we do as a value add is we write into my speaking contracts across the board, almost always are able to offer our mastermind students, our Platinum Inner Circle participants, the ability to come whenever I go speak at an event, to come to the event. And usually we can get free or discounted tickets. Where that's really great is, number one, there are just, I do some bigger events, so it's kind of cool. I know, Justin, you've got to take part in that program. But also, our audience is huge. If I'm speaking and there are people in my Platinum Inner Circle in the room, almost always I work them into the conversation. So there's really some extra play. So if you are considering, or you've never considered a mastermind, I'd really go back and listen to the last 10 minutes and really listen to what Justin was talking about as a guy that's been in several masterminds. And it's not just the skill set that you're going to get from being a part of that, but it's really the ability to leverage the network and the access that you would have that you probably wouldn't have otherwise. I mean, unfortunately, there is kind of a pay to play model in terms of access.
Yeah. You're buying access to that high end network, and you're also buying access for that speaker to promote you personally. So you're paying for it. But if you play your hand correctly, you will get the value from it.
Yeah. And I would just say that, just looking over the past 5 years that we've run our program, the people that really succeed in our program are really the folks that come with the attitude that they're going to bring value to the table, not just take it.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
And I mean, you've been a part of ours for several years. And I think you would agree that the people that seem to not make it and kind of deselect themselves out of the program really are the people that kind of come in there and go, I'm just here to take everything, and never really offer anything into the group.
And I think there's a counterintuitive point in business where, people, I mean, it comes back, even when you're teaching, like doing a podcast or something, some people are afraid to give their best material away for free because they have like a scarcity mindset. And they think that if I give everything I have for free, people, what do I have to offer after that? But the reality is that by adding tremendous value and giving away your best stuff for free, you're creating such value to these people that they want to hire you because you're the one that actually gave them value. You're not the one that held back. You're not the person that, is trying to hide everything behind a giant paywall. You're giving great stuff up front. And then they're also going to be the people that tell their friends about you because you helped them. So, and you're creating case studies and testimonial stories for yourself without even them hiring you necessarily. And a lot of them will share those stories with you.
Yep. Awesome. So Justin, parting word, somebody's listened to this at the end. What's the number one thing? What's one thing that as soon as they finish listening to this, they get off the treadmill or they come back in the house from a walk or they get to work? What can someone do when they're done right now to help start them down the path of expanding the business?
Well, number one, I'm going to promote my webinar. So I'd like you to register for the webinar. It's going to be a free webinar to come in. It takes place on July 31st at I believe it's 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'm 90% sure on that. But it's go to podcastmasterycourse.com. It'll take you to our registration page where you can register for the webinar. What we've decided to do is, even if you can't make it, go ahead and register, because if you register, we're going to have a limited replay available. It'll be only available for a few days, but we will have a limited replay. So make sure to register, because only the people that do will have access to that. We're not going to give that to anybody else. And then
after that, after July, I assume they can still go to that link, and they'll find out whenever your next webinar is. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you can go to that link, or we might be, the next webinar may be on a different topic, but I'll probably end up just forwarding that link to the next topic of the webinar that we're covering. But yeah, if you're interested in this podcasting thing, I highly suggest that you go there, because you're going to get a lot of free value from our presentation. We're going to be teaching you a ton of things that you can implement right away, and we want you to just take action and get started. I think speed of implementation is a huge driver of success in business. The people that actually are fastest to implement tend to win, even if they act in spite of perfection. So perfection in some regards is a standard that is actually lower than people think it is, because if you're not taking action due to needing everything to be perfect, you're actually holding yourself to a lower standard than people that are acting fast and just and adjusting as they go.
Well, and I think people that listen to this show will be very used to the phrase production before perfection.
Yeah.
Better to do it crappy than wait until it's absolutely perfect, because reality is you're not going to get perfect without the practice anyway.
And on this webinar, we're also going to talk about, because you don't necessarily even have to have a podcast. There are ways of getting on other people's shows without having a podcast. So we will dive into that a little bit. You'll hear a little bit about that. Obviously, we're limited. We're going to have about an hour to an hour and a half on the webinar. So we're not going to be able to cover everything in full detail, but we are going to cover topics like that, because even if you don't have a podcast, you can get on other people's shows and you can leverage the medium. And the more you do it, the more you're getting your name out there. And that's the name of the game these days in internet marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys, our guest today has been Justin Womack from JMack Media. You can find him at jmackmedia.com. He also has the Marketing Geeks podcast. You can go subscribe to the podcast, get all the updates at marketinggeekspodcast.com. And if you really want to check out what he and his agency are doing, go check him out on Fiverr Pro. When you get to Fiverr, go to fiverr.com. Just search in the bar for Justin Womack. You can see what he and the team over at JMack do. It is unbelievably awesome. And check out podcastmasterycourse.com, as well as just get in Justin's space. And when I say that, he's on Facebook all over the place, LinkedIn all over the place, but I can't think of a better podcast to subscribe to. They're fun. They're energetic. They've got a lot going on. They bring on really cool guests. It's really interesting. Justin, I just want to say before we jet out of here, thank you so much for taking the time out of a super busy day to jump on and spend some time with the folks that have come and participate. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. And if you happen to be in the Camarillo Library and you're listening to this live, I'm doing a freelancing talk tonight at 6:30 at the Camarillo Library. So if you happen to be listening live, you could go check me out there tonight.
Awesome. Awesome. So you guys, hey, as we wrap out of here, if you are looking to generate more referrals and or would like to be on an email list, really kind of staying in tune with this show as we bring it in and roll it out and what's coming up, go to expandthebusiness.com. And if you put in your address, remember, you're going to get a very special treat in the mail via banner season. So Justin, thank you so much. For those of you that have listened today on whatever your favorite channel is, I really appreciate it. Hope you'll leave us a review. Hope you'll check out expandthebusiness.com. And with that, guys, have an amazing day. Now go give somebody else an absolutely awesome day. We'll see you on the next show, guys.